I joined the Air Force February of 2001. My very first day after all my training was 9/11. I went into their initial invasion, 1st Air Force Unit on the ground in Iraq. Kids who are now my kids' age running up to us begging for water, begging for food, and they didn't have it, and these kids are just out in the middle of the desert. I mean, talk about reality check being 18, 19-year-old. They needed a 13-man security team to go up to Balad, Iraq, which is just north of Baghdad. And 2 weeks later, 9/11/04, and that's when a rocket landed right next to me and instantly blew off my legs. Like, they were just gone instantly. I am the most severely wounded airman to survive my injuries. Well, it's not really the title I expected or wanted to have for any means, but for all the people I had friends I lost in the Air Force who died in combat, and it'd be a disservice to them if I didn't live my life to the fullest. Living in Tucson for 10 years after I got injured, I saw the impact of the border wall issues. I saw the deaths, all the stories of everything going on. And when I saw the way the politicians were treating this again, it didn't seem like anything was going to get done. It didn't seem like they were going to pass the bills to fund the wall. And there's all this talk about people creating a GoFundMe and let's do this and do that. No one was really doing it. So I decided, well, why not me? I rolled it out. I rolled the GoFundMe out, and I told everyone what I did. I was like, hey, I did this GoFundMe, here it is. And I sent it out to all my media contacts, and then instantly it just blew up. People were giving their money to fund the wall. We're getting millions and millions and millions of dollars in donations in days. I get thousands of messages of everyone saying, don't give that money to the government. I don't trust them. Build them wall. The Democrats in Congress are not going to accept this money for the border wall. Now we have this $20 million now. What do we do with it? What do we do with this money to live up to our promise? And it's such a large amount of sum. I consulted with the nation's leading experts in national security, politics, finance, and we all came to the conclusion that with this money we were better equipped to build the wall ourselves than to give it to the government. And we're going to build it on private property, on landowners who want the wall. We don't need to consult with anyone. We don't need to get approval from the Democrats. We get approval from the landowners, and that's it. When we rolled out the new plan from going from we fund the wall to we build the wall, everyone needs to opt in, and it's just they click the button that says opt in. And what that does is allow their donation to go towards this new project since the mission has changed. It's as simple as that. You just click the button, and that will ensure the donation goes towards directly funding this border wall. If they don't opt in, their donation will be refunded. People who support it on both sides of the aisle, and they're going to be able to have a direct impact on the wall, whether they want to help build, they want to donate, trucking companies can help out, labor companies, we're going to be giving people jobs. Everyone can get involved, and that's the beauty of this thing, is it's we the people, and we the people are funding it, we the people are building it now, and we're protecting our nation.
Creek Country Club just outside of Tucson Town Hall with the team from We Build the Wall. So with me now is Brian Kolfage, the founder of We Build the Wall. How you doing, Brian?
Good, how's it going?
Fantastic.
Thanks.
I think a lot of people have heard about this guy who raised $20 million for a wall, and then you quit, and then you didn't quit, and then you got... What's going on, Brian? What's going on?
Well, I think there's a lot of misconception of what was really going on, and nothing has changed. We had a mission to raise money to fund this wall. It's never stopped. We just changed. Now we want to build the wall because we know Nancy Pelosi's not going to give President Trump a penny of this money. That is everyone's money who donate to this project, and we want to make sure we follow through on that. And we're going to build the wall now with those funds.
And.
Thank you.
And so you put a team together, and part of that process has also been doing sort of site inspections.
Right.
You were in Texas. So talk about what you learned in Texas and what you want to learn here.
Well, when we were in Texas, we learned that the border is very dynamic. And, you know, we have Brandon Darby on our team, and he's taught me everything I know about this border. And what works in one section doesn't work in the next section. And we're learning about the cartels and all the different factions that are going, that are influencing all the communities around here and in Texas. And we're seeing about how the border wall and what's in place now is not working in a lot of these communities, and how these ranchers and the people in these communities are they're threatened. And we shouldn't have that. This should not be going on in the United States. We should be protecting our people. We should be protecting our investments, our property values, and we're not getting that. And that's why I think it's important that we have this border wall and more immigration security in place so we can protect our people.
You shared with me a story once. You shared a story with me once about some of the problems that are going on here on the Arizona border. Can you maybe sort of share like a real-life situation that you're aware of here in Arizona?
Yeah, I think it's more than it's in Arizona and Texas, where the people are scared of having their homes broken into on the border, and so instead of locking their doors, as a lot of people do, they leave them open because they don't want their doors kicked in, they don't want their windows broken, and so they just leave their house unsecure as they go to the grocery store, so they don't have to pay to replace their windows. And it's just ridiculous, and it just goes back to protecting our people and protecting our communities, and we're not getting it.
And we're going to go into more details about actually building the wall, but just to let people know, what do you estimate it would cost the government to build a wall, and what do you think you can do it for?
Well, they're currently paying $18 to $19 million per mile, and that's a huge number. We, and our experts, believe we can do between $3 to $5 million per mile, depending on which model.
This is a name brand mile? This isn't like a...
This is an American mile.
Okay.
Made in America. A MAGA mile. And we believe that we can do it for cheaper because, for one, we're private. We can hire the best people, and we have the best American citizens, like all of you guys out here in this crowd, donating, not just money, but donating in kind through companies, supplies, and whatever we need to get this job done. It's the American people coming together to build this fence and this wall.
And we're going to take some questions from the audience, but before we do that, why don't you just tell people how this all started? It was one night around, what, 11:30?
Yeah.
Go ahead, start.
Well, I was at my home in Florida, and it was 10 days before Christmas, I believe, and I was just frustrated. It didn't seem like the president or our politicians were taking the border security serious, and you know, we all knew the shutdown was looming, and I had enough. I was fed up, and I thought, well, maybe, you know, if I create a GoFundMe, I'm just one person, maybe people will gravitate towards it because I'm a AAA amputee and I was in the military, and I thought maybe it would have a chance to do something, and that's what I did. I just created it. I talked to my friends before I rolled it out, and they were like, yeah, do it, Brian. I think it's a great idea, and they helped me set it all up. The next morning was Monday. It went live, and it just went viral. And we, you know, within a couple days, we had almost $5 million, and it was just exploding, and 10 million the next day, and then like 15 million, and then now 20 million. And it shows how important this matter is to the American people to raise almost $20 million right before Christmas. I mean, that's unheard of.
So, was there a moment, though, or how many times did you just sit in front of the computer and just watch the numbers tick?
I think we all were. I just remember telling like my friends and telling my wife, I was like, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. And my phone is blowing off the hook from all the media, and I mean, it went gangbusters. It was insane to see something like that, and it just shows what people can do in our, like, we're all one person. I'm one person, but together as a community, united, we're very powerful, and I think that's what makes this thing very powerful. And what will make it even more powerful is all of you continuing on and getting the word out to all your friends and all your family, explain what we're doing, because it's all about protecting our American values and what we have today in this country. I want my children, and when I have grandchildren, I want them to have the same freedoms that we have today. You know, I gave them 3 limbs for this nation, and I feel I'm deeply sacrificed and in debt to this country. And I don't want anything like the loss of my limbs to be in vain for anything. I will fight for it. I'll fight for those freedoms and fight for everything that we have today to ensure our future generations have it.
Brian, I think the beautiful and brilliant Jennifer Lawrence is going to pick out some audience members. Jen, can you maybe find somebody who has a question for Brian?
Anybody have a question? Hi, Brian. My name is Nancy Montoya. Hi again. My name is Nancy Montoya. How do you plan to build that wall? What's the process you're going to use?
Well, it's a very simple process. It may seem really complicated if the government was doing it, but it's very simple. We're reaching out to private property owners who have land along the border, and we found a lot of people who are very interested in it, and we are going to be basically going to them and giving them everything they need to be able to put a wall up. And it's going to be no different than that property owner building their own fence. And we're going to have a contractor come in and build it. We'll fund it. It's just as easy as that. If these property owners on the border want that wall, it's as simple as them putting in we'll submit a contract as if any construction was going to go on. It's no different, and it's very simple. And we believe that we could be breaking ground in 2 to 3 months from right now, and we hope to have a few lots nailed down for sure by the end of next week is what we're projecting in Tucson, or in Arizona and Texas.
Has it surprised you what an expert you've become on wall construction?
I had to build a wall in architecture school here in Tucson, so I had a little bit of experience building a little mini wall, but yeah,
Do you have a sandbox where you just sort of practice, or?
Yeah, on my desk I just have little Legos.
You have another one, Jennifer?
Yeah, if anybody who's not media wants to ask a question, just raise your hand or stand up.
Hi, Brian and everyone. Dean here, Southern Arizona Tribal Search and Rescue. I want to know how our team can help you. We've been on the border for a decade now and providing intel to Homeland Security and different agencies. And we know the soft spots, we know some areas, and we want to help out. So if there's a way that we can volunteer time, resources, and our disciplines, we'd be there for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, thank you. Anyone in the community who has a specialty that could, we could lend your hand to help this project, we welcome that. And it's people like yourself, and just not the donors, but people who have these companies and do things like that. We definitely need that, because we need to know that intel of where people are coming across. And we have our own guy, Brandon Darby, but we need more people. It matters that we need the community, because ultimately people like yourself, you know the community, and we just don't want to slap up wall where it's not having an impact. We want our sections of wall to have an impact on these communities, because if there's no one crossing and they're not like in a high crossing area, or there's not a lot of drugs, it's not pointless, but it's not going to be the priority. We're going to want to have the biggest impact right away. So yeah, answering your question, just get with, I'll have someone from our staff reach out to you after this.
All right. Brian, you've name-checked him twice, and I think he's all vaped up and ready to go. The editor of Breitbart, Texas, Brandon Darby. Brandon? Good to see you, man.
Thanks, boss.
Please.
Neil, do you want another question?
Yeah, let's take one more. Go ahead.
Hi, Brian. I'm Jeff Guest, resident here. What type of feedback, if any, have you gotten from the Trump administration, and how many miles of wall do you think you'll be able to build?
The feedback has been positive. One of our board members, Chris Kobach, he was up for Department of Homeland Security Secretary. He's on our team now, and he's been speaking with the president himself directly. The president supports what we're doing. He approves what we're doing. And when we start breaking ground, we're going to be basically supplementing what President Trump is doing if he ever gets the funding. I think they're projecting to do 250 miles of border wall in strategic locations. We are going to match whatever the president does. And if they do 250, we're going to shoot for 250 because we all know that 250 that he's doing is not enough to impact everything that we need. We have 2,000 miles of open border. The cartels are very adaptive, and we need to secure our entire border, I believe.
Yeah, and you know, Brandon with us, you know, I don't think there's anyone who knows the border like you do. I mean, you're literally, there's, you know, such thing as like when you watch, you know, there's a difference between watching a football game from the stands and then, you know, at the line of scrimmage, football is a completely different game. That's where you're living.
Right. So, first off, thank you for coming tonight. It's, you know, we've been fighting this, and some of you in this room have fought this much longer, but we've been trying to expose cartels and tell the stories of Border Patrol agents and communities along the border, on both sides of the border. It's not just the U.S. side where people are getting hurt by cartels, right? And we've been trying to tell their story for almost a decade now, traveling all 9 sectors, going into Mexico. We've developed sources that are just unbelievable sourcing in Mexico. So we have sources on both sides. And to see so many people fired up in supporting Brian's effort, and to see my old boss, Steve Bannon, join the effort, and to see so many people like you come, it really, honestly, I could get choked up because I see that we are going to win this. We're going to win this. We're going to fight this. We're going to win. You know, I was initially a little bit hesitant because I guess I deal with so many people in politics. I'm just, to be honest, I get very discouraged dealing with people in politics. I don't find politicians to be very nice usually. And I also don't find people in political media to be very nice. I don't know if y'all have noticed that yet.
Easy.
Except, no, there's some nice ones. But so here's the bottom line. I was very hesitant to get involved. We have been trying to stick it to cartels, to Mexican cartels, and make people pay attention in this country to what specific Mexican cartels are doing to our country. And it feels like we're yelling at a roof, like our ceiling, like no one's hearing us, or very few people hear us. And when I started to realize that this group was going deeper, it's like, hey, we need to build the wall. That's one part of a multi-tiered solution to a very complex problem. But we also need to stick it to cartels in other ways, right? Like, we have to secure our country. And when I realized this group was all about it, I joined in. And I'm honored to sit on the stage with you. And I really appreciate what you've done and the encouragement you've given these people.
So for people, obviously you can't put a wall everywhere, and we've heard that, you know, walls be impossible and everything else. But for people who are wondering, is a wall possible and useful at certain sectors of the border?
Okay, so here's where things get a little tricky. And because people, you know, most of our media situation is everyone turns on Fox or they turn on MSNBC or CNN, and these people are pundits and they have these little sound bites they get to give for 30 seconds. Well, the issue is a little more complex than that, right? So the bottom line is this, is if you build a wall across the entire border all the way to the moon, then the cartels are going to switch to coming through ports of entry. And if you secure the ports of entry, they're going to find a way to go back and try to get between ports of entry. The facts show that fencing, barriers, walls, depending on what's needed in the specific area, absolutely work. Do they work 100%? Do they end all of the cartels and make Mexico okay again and America okay? No. Are they a vital component of that? 100%. And I don't think any serious person could allege otherwise. And generally, people say otherwise, but when you actually know the facts and you press them, they'll eventually admit that fencing and walls are a part of a larger solution. Big part, key part.
And
First part.
I was at a briefing that you gave Brian and the team, McAllen, Texas. And if you just sort of, we're going to take some questions from the audience, but if you can just sort of lay out, just so that they have a deeper appreciation, why is it that some sectors have a lot of human traffic, some sectors have a lot of coke, others have pot? Like what? How is it? It's not just geography.
Okay, well, I don't want to bore people, but this is what I've been doing for a decade, and now that people are finally listening, I just can't stop talking if I stop talking. So I'm going to try to not bore you with this, all right? Okay, a lot of you know this already, but I'll just go here, right? Okay, if you look at the DEA map of which cartels control where on the border, they're going to say the Gulf Cartel controls from the Gulf of Mexico to Zapata, Texas, then it's the Zetas, and they control to Acuna in the Del Rio sector, and then it's Sinaloa until you get to the Sinaloa cartel until you get to Juarez. It's the Juarez cartel, and then after that it's the Sinaloa again, all the way to Tijuana, Mexico. That's just not true. It is true, but it's not true. So all of the Sinaloa cartel is made up of hundreds of different organizations. And those hundreds of organizations operate under the banner of the Sinaloa Federation. But they're all different cartels, and they all have different temperaments. Some grow marijuana, some grow poppy, some manufacture fentanyl and methamphetamine, some simply traffic drugs. Well, changes that we made in this country ultimately led to some of those groups saying, hey, we can't make money off of our horrible marijuana anymore, so we need to switch to something else to replace our profits. And when you look at the Gulf Cartel, the Reynosa faction, they switched to human smuggling. So now they make as much or more from smuggling people into our country and from our asylum laws, from the holes in our asylum laws, they make as much or more from that as they do from narcotics now. They are, in fact, a U.S. asylum policy hole cartel.
They're like a franchisee.
Right. So this is the situation. So those cartels have chosen to heavily focus on human smuggling. Most of the guys you're dealing with in Arizona still focus on drugs, but now they're starting to say, wait a minute, we can focus on human smuggling too, and we're going to make all of the money from that as well. So this has become, illegal immigration has become a fuel for cartels in Mexico. So the liberals who think that they're helping people in Mexico or Central America by allowing this to continue are actually fueling the very groups people are trying to get away from in the first place.
And what is it ahead?
Was that boring? Was I too boring? Okay.
What do they make ahead?
It depends on the group. So if we're talking about the Reynosa faction of the Gulf Cartel, which is the most prolific, and I'll tell you this, they generally charge somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a head, right? Unless you're a special interest alien. And if you're Middle Eastern, they'll say, okay, here's the deal. If you want to go there and you want to request asylum, we'll let you do it for $5,000. But if you want to go there and you want us to sneak you in and really get you to Houston or Dallas or Tucson or Phoenix, then it's going to cost you even more, maybe $12,000 to $15,000. So these groups are really making money. Every time you hear, and it's a fact that last year there was 1,100 to 1,200 people per day apprehended. And remember, we only apprehend half of them, right? Approximately. 1,100 to 1,200 people per day apprehended crossing our southern border per day. Now you think about the amount of money that is to those criminal groups. Not only the amount of money it's going to cost you in the long term to educate those people and provide health care, and we can go down that line, I'll let other people do that. But you think of just the amount of money those cartels are making.
And there are sectors where there are just runners, where it's not asylum, it's actually, are there sectors just for...
It changes, you know, like if you know, like the DEA map would say that Arizona is Sinaloa cartel. No, it's Los Salazar, it's Los Mimos, and a couple of other criminal groups. They're at war with each other, but they're actually under the banner of the Sinaloa cartel.
Now you know why we hired this guy.
Yeah, so I can't help it. Sorry. So basically...
You really want to drill down. Call Brandon Darby.
So when we say sectors, there are areas along the border that they use for human smuggling, and there are areas they use for different drugs. And a lot of times they pump the areas they use for human smuggling full of people, right, to cross, because they know that the agents have to deal with, especially if it's a lot of kids, the agents have to come off of their assignments and they have to deal with those kids so they don't have if a kid's sick and dies, and we saw what happens. And when they do that, then that criminal group will cross a drug load and use those kids as a mechanism to distract.
Yeah. Jennifer?
Yes.
Maybe somebody in the audience has a question for Brian or Brandon. We've covered a lot of territory.
My name sounds similar.
What's your name, sir?
I'm JR. And I live here. My question will take a couple of sentences. We discovered that during the Obama administration, which I personally refer to as the abomination, that they were actually, when they had cases against corporations, the SEC or the FBI or whatever, and it caused them to pay a fine, they often gave them a discount if they would pay money to a left-wing organization. Check it out, this really happened. Now, my question is, if that's the case, couldn't Donald Trump direct his SEC and any of the other organizations, excuse me, not the SEC, the FBI, narcotics groups and so forth, when they confiscate millions of dollars every year from these guys in assets and real dollars, how about if Trump directs that money to you so we can build the wall?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be great, but
You're welcome.
I don't know if the Democrats, because I think the Dems have to have a say in it. So, I think we've been down that road, and they don't support the wall. And as you see, they're not letting Trump really do anything, and they want to just destroy what his plans are.
But sir, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that was hundreds of millions of dollars during the Obama administration to those left-wing groups.
Money, you can redirect it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Jennifer, is there anyone else?
Anybody else have a question for Brandon? Oh, you want? Here, it's okay. We'll go.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, how are you guys doing? Thanks for doing this tonight. Is there a specific place in Arizona that you have in mind to build a wall? Or is there a specific place that you think needs it more than any other? Because we have a huge unprotected border, a couple strands of barbed wire and little.
Right. We actually went and toured a lot of the border yesterday, and I saw exactly what you're talking about. The issue with Arizona is there's very few private property landowners. A lot of the land is federal or state, so we can't touch it. And what we're doing is working with private property landowners. We have narrowed it down to a select few in a select few zones. We don't want to basically we can't go public with the information exactly, because there are groups, different liberal groups, who do want to attack it and want to do everything to stop it. And we're not ready to release that, but I can tell you that we have selected areas in Arizona to build this wall.
Well, I think we're all glad to hear that, because we need it here badly.
Yeah, we're moving forward with it, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi there, my name's Dave and live in Quail Creek. Where do these people get the $10,000 and $15,000 to come across?
Dave, is that your name?
Yeah.
Dave, that's a great question. He asked, where do the people get the $10,000 and $15,000 to cross? And the fact is they don't get it. What happens is when the Gulf Cartel began to try to replace its profits with human smuggling, it sent out scouts. It sent people to Central America to sell the journey to those communities. And they say, hey, you don't have to pay anything up front. It's okay. Whatever you have, $200, $300, whatever. You don't have to pay anything up front. We'll get you into the United States, but for the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to send me money. You're going to send us the money back via Western Union or a Landy Valuta or one of the wire services. And if you don't send it back, we know where your family is. We have people in your communities, and we're going to do X, Y, and Z to your grandmother or your sister or your father. And so people send the money back. So it actually is, we actually have I think the Western Hemisphere's largest issue of it's modern day slavery. It's indentured servitude at best, right? At least it's indentured servitude that these people have gotten themselves into to try to get here. But they don't have the money to come up front. That's just the thing. And that's one of the things that makes it so heinous, is that not only is it, I mean, do we have the Angels family? We have Angel families here. I'm sure we have family members here. Yes. sure we have family members here of slain Border Patrol agents. And, you know, this is horrible for our country, what's occurring, but it's also horrible for their countries and for those people. You know, the left is not loving these people by continuing this, because it is indentured servitude, and they do end up having to pay them most of their money for the next 5 to 10 years.
Does anybody have questions on this side of the room?
Yeah, we're kind of ignoring this side over here. Sorry about that.
Sorry, guys.
I'm going to turn my body.
We're going to go stereo.
Yeah.
Are you getting any pushback from the politicians regarding permits? I was concerned, you know, because you can't build a wall here 3 feet high without getting a permit from Pima County. So I don't know what you're going to be doing.
We haven't submitted for permits for any project yet, but we are taking proactive measures to ensure that it's going to go smoothly. And we have local politicians to the highest state level in both states, Arizona and Texas, that are on our team. And they want to help this. They obviously understand the importance of having border security. And so they're going to make sure everything goes smoothly.
Is there any other questions on this side? Anybody? No?
Well, I did have a question, Brandon. Is, you know, you mentioned certain, like, you know, Middle Eastern and other ethnicity. What are some of the other, just so people have an idea of the breadth of this problem? It's not just people from Guatemala, Honduras, you know, in Central America, and when you say Middle East, but they also find people from, like, Russia or...
Right. Okay, so during the Obama administration, the last years of the Obama administration, they wouldn't put out data or information about the nation's, not ethnicities, the nationalities of people being caught at our southern border. So what happened is some very caring agents became whistleblowers, and they released law enforcement sensitive documentation to us. We went through it. We redacted a lot. We gave the agencies a chance to redact certain things. And what we discovered was that there were people from 73 nations coming across our southern border at that time. A lot of those nations were Middle Eastern nations, greater Middle Eastern nations, Pakistan, Afghanistan, obviously the Horn of Africa, which is a terror hotbed. It doesn't mean those people who came were terrorists, I get that, but it does show that there is a pathway from those terror hotbeds to our southern border, and that's obviously very concerning, right?
And then when they come, they get, what happens? So if someone says, I have asylum,
they ask for asylum.
They ask for asylum, and then they get on the bus and go wherever they want?
No, so it depends, right? So if you're from Somalia, we can't deport you because we have no relations with the Somali government. So if you're from Somalia and you're on the terror watch list, you get to stay. And if you didn't commit an act of terrorism, we can't keep you in custody, which I think is not great. Some people come in, they turn themselves in at ports of entry, and other people try to sneak in. I think 2 years ago we had a case in Patagonia, Arizona, near Sonoyta, where I think it was 5 Pakistani men and 1 Afghan, or vice versa, who were caught 17 miles into the U.S., like, right? So they weren't trying to turn themselves in, they were trying to sneak in. And that's a bit of a concern, right? But both happen. But a lot of people just turn themselves in at this point. That's how, you know, a lot of us, we talk about build the wall. A lot of politicians talk about building the wall. And they put it on Donald Trump, and there's a lot Donald Trump can do. There's a lot the executive can do. But a lot of this stuff has to do with Congress. So let's keep in mind, most of our Republicans and Democrats in Congress haven't made a peep to change our asylum laws. They haven't made a peep to change the loopholes that allow people, in fact, they're not even loopholes, they're major features of the law that allow people just set foot on our soil and request asylum to the first agent you see, and then you'll probably get to stay. And that's where we're at. And we have people from, as of 2015 or 16, it was 73 nations, I believe, who we caught at our southern border.
Yeah, and at the State of the Union, the President was mentioning the number of women who suffer assaults. I think
sexual assault specifically.
And you know, how real is that problem? Just so people know, is this just bumper sticker hype, Or is this something that, how would you gauge that problem?
Well, I think the president was wrong when he said 1 out of 3. I think the numbers are actually 70 to 80%. And not only do I think that, but most left of center advocacy groups who work with women from Central America, they believe that as well. That I think Amnesty International puts it at 60%. That's pretty high. So he downplayed it to be safe. And then when he downplayed it to be safe, the Washington Post came out and said, oh, well, he said sexually assaulted, but it's just, what was it, sexually, basically they downplayed it and said it was only 31%, not 33% like the president said. Only 31% of the women get sexually, I mean, this is what we're dealing with, right? So yeah, it's a very big problem. It relates specifically, certain cartels have a tendency to do that more than others. Most of those cartels are on the Texas border who tend to engage in that behavior that overtly. And that's why you see a lot of the caravans form, is because people are trying to get here and not have to go through those two cartels, Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel.
And One American News was down, as I said before, we were down in McAllen with the We Build the Wall team and Brian, and we saw migrants coming out of the woods.
Yeah.
Can you sort of describe what that feeling was like?
Yeah, I mean, we were down there 5 minutes, and we saw a group of maybe 20 people just strolling in, not even, didn't even care, just walking around. And they went to go find the Border Patrol so they could turn themselves in. Like, they want to be caught. And, a couple minutes later, we went maybe a quarter mile down the road. Boom, another group, another 20. And we got out and spoke with them. They came from Honduras. And the same thing. They just kept going. They wanted to go find the Border Patrol, turn themselves in. And they're not being stopped at the border. They're crossing the Rio, stepping foot on American soil. They're good to go automatically.
Jennifer, you have a question from the audience?
We do. Hi, my name's Nick. I'm a resident here in Quail Creek, too. And I got an engineer question. It's part of my DNA. I understand you're wanting to build your wall on private land, and hopefully we'll get some funding to build some portion of the wall on government land. Are there any plans, or how are you going to connect these two walls?
They're going to be similar walls, if not maybe the exact same. And when we'll be building this wall before the government even gets money to build their wall. And when they come in, and when the government comes in, they'll just connect like they do right now. There's walls all over the place that aren't connected.
Yes, but you're on private land and they're on government land. There is a problem there.
Yeah.
Well, sort of, but some of the walls they're building are actually on private land as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Some of the walls they're building are on private land as well.
Yeah, to get more specific, as like an engineering aspect, it's very simple to interlock the two. They're going to be the exact same walls, more or less, and they'll just be adding another partition, and they'll link up, like almost like a Lego locks in, just the same type of section.
Any other questions? I have to go to him, Rich. Sorry. There you go.
Yes, hi, Gary from Sahuarita. Question is that the Border Patrol has said that there's basically 10 strategic locations where a partition wall would be effective, in addition to the technology and increased Border Patrol agents. So have you worked with Border Patrol to know which of these 10 areas they would want a wall, and would you be placing a wall in one of those 10 areas?
Do you want to answer that one?
I'll answer it, yeah. Well, first off, I'm a big fan of when we say Border Patrol, like we're talking about Border Patrol's politically appointed management, not Border Patrol agents, right? So what we do is we listen to Border Patrol agents on the ground in all stations in all 9 sectors, and we ask them what they're experiencing. And we listen to property owners, and we also look at the organized criminal group patterns in Mexico when we try to determine where things are needed. It's great that Border Patrol management says, hey, right now there are these 10 locations, but guess what? As soon as they build those 10 locations, well, all of a sudden there's 10 different locations, right? So picture the border as though it's a leaky water hose, okay? And every time you stop up one area, the water is coming out another. And So any barrier that's built along that southern border, even if it's built in the slowest traffic area possible, which it won't be, but even if it were, it's going to be helpful, because as soon as barrier is built in an area that is a high traffic area today, other areas that don't have a barrier are going to become those high traffic areas.
Awesome. We have another question, Neil.
Sure.
Right here. Hey.
Yeah, hey.
Larry here at Quail Creek. You know, you've said a lot of things that most of us in here believe. There are a lot of people that don't believe what you're saying. Is there any thought process or thinking about how do you get through to people who are just denying that this even exists?
Well, I think the people who are just flat out denying it, it's going to be very difficult to convince them otherwise, just because they're not open-minded enough to see the issue. I don't think we're ever going to convince everybody that this is a major problem, but we have 60 million people who voted for President Trump, and we believe that those people all support border security. You would believe at least most of them do. I mean, and then we also
might be some here tonight.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have been receiving many donations from Democrats as well, and they tell me, they're like, Brian, you know, I don't support President Trump, but I know that the border security and protecting the American people is an important issue, and they're donating, and they're Democrats. So I think it's a slim amount of people who don't support it and are never going to support it, just because they want open borders, and they want our country to be invaded, more or less. They don't care. They're socialists. They think that America has everything and everyone else should have everything. But you know, I don't believe in that, and I work hard for everything, and I want my family and the people of this country to have everything that we have today, tomorrow.
Brandon, thank you very much for being with us. A big round of applause. Brandon, thank you, man. We have the former Secretary of State of Kansas, Chris Kopach. How you doing, Chris? My old boss, Stephen Kay. How you doing, sir?
You guys want to sit down?
So, Steve, how did you get involved in this?
Is this up? Yeah, thanks. Somebody gave me a call right after I'd known Brian for years as when he was running right-wing media and other websites, and you know, knew kind of the legend of this guy. He was such a hard worker. Somebody called me a couple of days after he got going, and we had a conversation, I think, with Brian 10 days into his thing, and just talked about he might want to think about flipping this from funding a wall where the money just goes to the U.S. Treasury because you can't designate it, to actually build a wall, to actually a citizens action initiative to actually build a wall. Then Brian talked to the GoFundMe people, and here we are today with Brian leading an effort that we've put the original gangsters of the OGs of the MAGA movement together to help him.
Your entourage?
Yeah. Well, look, it's a lot more people have contacted us. The advisory board is going to expand out, but when you have people like Tom Tancredo, you have the Angel Moms and Dads, you have Chris Kobach, you have Sheriff Clark, you have Eric Prince, we have an industrialist, one of the top industrialists in Pennsylvania, John Moran. We have General Robert Spalding, one of the single brightest guys, I think, at the White House. You have the quality of people that come around Brian and Brian's leadership to do this has been pretty impressive, and I think it's because of the nature of what this stands for.
You know, a lot of people have made the point that the situation we have now has made every city and town a border city and town. And Chris, you're from Kansas, so how did you get involved, and to sort of talk about your perspective of why this is so important to you?
Well, I think everyone would agree that every state's a border state now, and although Kansas is not a state that's physically on the southern border or the northern border, we are a destination state. So you've got meatpacking plants where you know, Dodge City, still a place where the cattle are taken, but now they're slaughtered there. You've got meatpacking plants that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was U.S. citizens who were in those jobs predominantly with some legal aliens. Now you have those plants filled primarily with illegal aliens. Construction, food services industries, everything, a lot of the same industries you see in different parts of Arizona and all over the country. And so I became very involved in the issue, though, originally with John Ashcroft when he was the U.S. Attorney General. I was his chief advisor on border security and immigration at the time of 9/11. I started to work for him just a little over a week before 9/11. And that changed my life, because for the next few years, everything I did was trying to look at the loopholes that people, terrorists and then other illegal aliens. Now, the terrorists, they came in legally. 5 of them became illegal aliens of the 19 cohort in the 9/11 attack.
And Steve, I am curious, what's your quick read on the politics? The president is at Camp David this weekend. He's going to be working. The Democrats have offered $1.3 billion. Maybe Mulvaney said he'll take $3 billion. What's your quick read on that?
I'm not sure that's $1.3 billion to build a wall. I mean, it's the president, President Trump, and one of the reasons, I think the principal reason he won the primary was that he talked to the people in a very different vernacular than politicians. He's not a conventional politician. He committed to build the wall. I think this $1.3 billion and the $1.7 billion, all that, is some sort of hide the football on Normandy fence or some sort of fencing. I think it's very straightforward. He's got the appropriations process, which he's doing a good faith effort to do that. He's got 2 other options. I think he's got an option that Mo Brooks talked about today, an executive action option, and I think he's got an option on declaring an emergency, a national security emergency on the border. I think that President Trump will go to El Paso. I believe he did a great job at State of the Union. I think he'll tee it up more in El Paso, which is a great example of how a border wall has actually helped safety in national security. And I think the president I don't think he'll take anything short of actually building the wall. So I think he'll take one of these 2 actions, and that may get tied up in the courts. But I think the politics of it, I think he's committed. I think he knows that the people that supported him, that this was incredibly important, and they felt it was necessary for national security. And just like the Border Patrol thinks, they understand that it stops illegal entry.
Let me add something else to put that in perspective. So the border is 1,933 miles. We have fewer than 100 miles where there is an actual barrier sufficient to stop pedestrians. I'm talking, a real wall or the steel bollard fences. Fewer than 100 miles. The president's $5.7 billion ask is only for about 230 miles of wall. So even if he got all of that, you still would have over 1,600 miles of wide open border. And so that's why it's so important for We Build the Wall and for private citizens to step up. Let's imagine the president gets his $5.7 billion and he declares a national emergency. He sends the Army Corps of Engineers out to build for the next 2 years for the rest of his first term. Even then, it's unlikely that the Army Corps of Engineers could complete that 1,600 miles. It's going to require an effort both of the government, us acting as we the people, but also us acting as private citizens. And that's why We Build the Wall is this wonderful confluence of government action supplemented by private property owners with the help of their fellow citizens saying, look, I own this property and I'm feeling the results, the damage of illegal immigration directly. We just yesterday, Brian and I were talking to one rancher who's, you wouldn't believe this, cattle rustling still exists, and his cattle were stolen by people who came across from Mexico and stole the cattle. You've got you've got violence against, people. Robert Krentz is a perfect example. You've got drug smuggling, where the drugs are bringing in all kinds of additional criminal activity. All of this is hurting these private landowners in a direct, palpable way, and they have the right as property owners, private property owners under our Constitution, to protect their property, and one way they can do it is to build a wall, and we the people get the benefit of that too. So that's why you're seeing so many people in this grassroots movement say, yeah, I want to do that. I want to help that private property owner build that wall. In fact, I think one of our original $10,000 donors, Wayne Schnell, is in the audience. We didn't even contact him. We just heard he was here. Thanks, Wayne.
Wow. You think he's going to plank gross,
I mean, but nobody contacted Wayne. So many people just said, I believe in this, and they recognize that private citizens have a role along with we the people acting through our government.
Go ahead, Brian. You were just...
Oh, no, I was just...
I'm curious, what have you learned from these 2 guys?
Oh man, they're brilliant, and I learned that.
This is a PG-13, baby.
Yes. Go on.
I learned that this guy Chris, if you read the media, like the liberal media, you'd think he's the devil. Same with Steve. but they're actually.
There's a difference. Chris is not. I am.
Do you have a Grim Reaper costume?
These are guys who care about their country, and as a veteran, Steve's a veteran. I didn't even know that until I linked up with him. And I think we're all people who care about this country, and we just want to do what's right for the country, and that's why we're all here on this.
It took Brian to have the idea, and to kind of inspire people, and his idea is drawing more people to it. What I was impressed with is when I talked to the people that were originally involved in the immigration debates, everybody wanted to sign up, and we'll have more people in the advisory board and more people helping out on the different committees, the construction committee, the land acquisition committee. So this will be first class, but it's heartening to me to see after so many years of talking about it, you're actually having action. And I think that's what President Trump sees. President Trump now knows, I think we're at an inflection point. It's time to get on with it. And he's a man of action. That's why I think these next couple of weeks are going to be so important for the administration, so important for the Trump movement, so important for this for the immigration movement. So I think it's something that I think it's converging at the right time.
Yeah, in my regular day job, I cover politics in D.C. and I spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill. And Brian, as soon as you reach that like $8-10 million mark, you could actually feel among House Republicans, even Senate Republicans, they started to get a little backbone.
Right.
And you also met with guys from the House Freedom Caucus. How did that go? Tell me about that.
Well, the night after the House voted to fund the bill or to fund the wall and to fund the government, I received a call from Representative Jim Jordan of the Freedom Caucus of Ohio, and he told me that everyone who donated to that GoFundMe and that GoFundMe itself impacted the House, their vote that night, and that's why they funded the wall, that bill that night. And Pelosi was out talking a couple days before, bragging that they didn't have the votes to do it. But that GoFundMe ultimately impacted the vote, and it shows what you guys, the people, the power you have coming together on something just so mundane like a GoFundMe. Who ever thought a GoFundMe would be able to impact a vote in the House?
Who'd have thunk it?
Exactly.
Jennifer, I can't believe no one has a question.
Hello? Can you hear me? Hey guys, can we get the mic on, please?
Here we go.
Hey, there we go. Okay, so we have a few questions from one of our sponsors tonight, Gateway Pundit. Can anyone on the panel explain the Democrats' position on border security?
Kobach. By the way, this should be our next Secretary of Homeland Security right here, Department of Homeland Security, Chris Kobach. Kobach is the leading expert on all things related to immigration. He's very fair about this. He knows we've got to go after the companies that employ the illegal aliens. It's just not looking after going after illegal aliens or visa overstays. It's across the board. And if all of us do our job right, one day Chris Kobach is going to be there with President Trump as his Director of Homeland Security.
And not running for Senate?
Who knows? But to that question, I mean, look, in 2006, there was a huge bipartisan majority in both chambers for the act building the wall, and including many of the people like Pelosi and Schumer and folks who now are saying they're absolutely dead set against any wall whatsoever. So they recognized back then that physical barriers make sense. Now it's because it's President Trump, and it's because they want to take a scalp. They want to hand President Trump a loss, and I think they are putting their partisan objective ahead of the benefit of the country, and we saw that before.
Jennifer,
another question is, how is Steve Bannon, and what advice does he have for Trump supporters?
For Trump's voters?
Trump supporters.
I think for Trump supporters is continue to look. You saw in the State of the Union 3 things. He said, "I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to make China have structural changes in their economy, and I'm going to get us out in a reasonable amount of time out of these foreign wars." That's the basic tripod that we ran. Those are the 3 legs of the stool, the reason Donald Trump's president of the United States. And in the State of the Union, besides all the happy talk people talked about unity and everything like that, you cut to it. He promised, once again reiterated, he's going to deliver on those promises. And at the end, the cherry on top was to compare and contrast the radicalization of the Democratic Party as really the Democratic Socialist Party. And he made a stand that we're a free country and we're not going to become a socialist country. And I think that highlights in high relief what this is all about. For the One American, the Gateway Pundit folks at home, just if President Trump hits those three, builds a wall, makes China really reform, and we get our manufacturing jobs back here in the United States, and he starts to get us out of these, I think right now, pointless foreign wars, he will win in a landslide in 2020.
Jennifer, go ahead.
What else can ordinary Americans do to help with this project?
Yeah, I mean, everyone just needs to get the word out. I mean, this whole thing was built on a movement of people. It's we the people.
WeBuildTheWall.us.
Yeah, go to our website, WeBuildTheWall.us. Explains everything, and it's just getting the word out. When you guys go home tonight, and people watching on the live stream, email everyone. Get on your Facebooks, get on social media, contact everyone you know, tell them what you saw here tonight, send them our website, WeBuildTheWall.us, and get the word out. Be the army, be our army, be the citizens of America, and fight back for what you believe in. Because if we don't fight back, what's going to happen to this country in 20 years? We're not going to have these freedoms that we have today. This is our last stand right now.
Let me give Brian. Let me give Brian credit for having an insight that so many of us who've been working in illegal immigration and border security for so many years didn't see. You know, we knew that if you do a poll, and depending on how you phrase the question, you're going to have 65, 70, 75%, maybe more of the public saying, yeah, we want a barrier on our southern border. And it may be even higher depending on how you poll the question. But no one ever thought, or no one ever conceived, maybe the American people want it so badly that we are willing to do it ourselves if Congress stands in the way and won't get the job done. And that's what Brian figured out. He struck the match and showed everyone that, yeah, the American people are willing not only to vote for this and elect Donald Trump president, they're willing to put their own money behind it because it's so important to our country, to our children, to our grandchildren. We have got to protect our country, and that means protecting jobs for Americans. That means protecting us against crime, protecting us against terrorism, and the wall is a critical component of that. So thank you, Brian. Steve,
No, that's it. Listen, and going to the website, it's not about donations. We've had so many people try to volunteer. We're getting organized. Brian's putting together a management team. There's going to be tons of volunteers for this. We're going to go all over the country and do these town halls to get the word out. So there's a lot to do. Just don't think it's about hitting it with a check. In fact, if you can't do that, that's fine. There's so much more you can do. So just come to the site. Brian's going to have this whole thing organized in the next couple of weeks for volunteers, and we go to town hall. It's to get the word out, and particularly get the word out how central this is to our sovereignty, our national security, and to the rule of law in this country.
One more?
Let's take a question from the audience. Does anybody have a question?
Hey, how are you? Good, how are you? Good. When I toured down at the rancher's land, they showed me areas where the barrier had openings. I can't remember the terminology, but they stated that those places where you could literally drive a truck through it would be opened and left open and unattended for up to 6 months, and a lot of this tied into EPA, the animals, and the flooding. So is there anything that you can tell us about that and how that's being handled that would, so you have the wall, but is it going to be effective, or are they going to leave it open?
Yeah, I can address some of that. So yeah, there are some areas where there may be endangered species, and there may be a legitimate claim that there has to be some sort of opening there. But you know, a lot of the lawsuits that try to make that argument, a lot of them are baseless, and they're just trying to use that EPA as the NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, as a wedge to try to stop the building of the wall. But the bottom line is, the more miles of wall that are built, as Brendan Darby said earlier, that's more tape on the leaky hose. That's more areas that it makes it harder for the cartels to smuggle. Just yesterday, Brian and I were on top of Montezuma Pass, which is at the top of the Huachuca Range. And if you look east toward Naco, you see this beautiful more than 10 miles of steel 18-foot bollard fence, and it is very secure. You look west toward the Patagonias, it's wide open. And what does that cause? Well, it causes the traffic to move through the unsecured area. But it's not pointless, because as we noticed yesterday, the Border Patrol action was concentrated on the open area. They didn't need to devote as many vehicles or agents to the area that has the fence. The fence is a force multiplier. And so as we add miles, it's like adding Border Patrol agents. We're multiplying the effectiveness of those agents.
I have to interrupt here. Everybody, we're going to break off from One America News. I want to thank the One America News viewers. The conversation will continue online with Gateway Pundit. Everybody in the hall, why don't you say goodbye to all the viewers of One America News? Thanks, Brian, Steve, Chris.
I want to thank the Herring family. I want to thank the Herrings and One America for doing this. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we'll keep going. Go ahead, please.
Are we doing another question?
Let's do one more question. Then I want to bring everybody out so we can get some high energy on this.
All right, sounds good. Who has a question? You, sir.
Thank you guys so much for being here. And I don't think I've heard it said, but I want to thank Brian for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah, please. Let's go ahead.
Come on.
And I'd just like to point out that I think, the really cool thing about this country is that we can all disagree on things. Is that right, Steve?
That would be correct.
Yeah. And, great. And I'm is the mic? I'm just going to approach real quick because I do have a gift for Steve. Should I give a gift to Steve Bannon? Are you guys ready for a gift for Steve Bannon over here?
It's just got to be checked by the Secret Service.
You're fine. Go ahead and hold on.
I just have a gift for Steve. Shut him down.
Sir, this is the middle of a program. Let's do it after the program. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll meet you after the program, bro.
Criminal right here. Steve, you are going to prison. You both know.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you, brother.
We have a better question, actually. You know what?
Quite the entourage.
Where did he go?
All right, it's fine, guys. Let's go back to the show. Come on, go ahead, sit down, guys.
I have a great question. Hey, Nia or
Jennifer.
I just want to tell Brian.
Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to tell Brian because of the.
Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to tell Brian that because of me putting my name on that $10,000 donation, of course I had my share of hate mail from it. But 3 weeks ago, on Facebook, through Messenger, I got contacted by a radio station from Copenhagen, Denmark, wanting to interview me and see why I donated to a wall. And I said, sure, here's my phone number. About 2 minutes later, the phone rang, and I'm on the air in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I talked for 20 minutes to him, okay? And finally I hung up, and I own a resort up in Tucson. Okay. And about 20 minutes later, they called me back, and they said, we had such good results from your thing. Could you be on the air tomorrow morning on our morning show? Well, stupid me, I don't know to think about. There's 8 hours difference. It's 11 o'clock at night here. At 20 after 11, I'm sitting there answering this. I was on for 10 minutes, talking, promoting the wall and everything. And, of course, just like Donald Trump, I was promoting my own businesses, too. And I'm telling you something, if you don't get me helping you out, you're missing a great thing, because I'm 82 years old and I can sell it more than anybody, okay?
Thank you.
Amen.
So,
can I just say something about the previous guy? That happens at all these events. That shows we're winning, okay? When they're up saying you're racist, when they're up saying you're nativist, when they're up saying that you're xenophobes, when they're in that part of the conversation and you're talking about building the country, protecting the country, building our economy, and making sure that Hispanic and African American workers are not inundated with really cheap illegal alien labor that's destroying their lives, okay, that's when we're winning. And that's what the Trump movement is, and that's why President Trump's going to win again in 2020. That guy's the best spokesman for what we're doing.
And we've had some people join the stage. We have some angel parents. Miriam Mendoza, Steve Lonenbeck, and former Congressman Tom Tancredo. So let's start with Marianne and see. First, Marianne, why don't you talk about why you got involved with Brian and what this whole group means to you?
Well, my life changed forever on May 12, 2014, when I got a call from Afghanistan from a fellow police officer, Brandon, who was Air National Guard and deployed, that, Mom, Brandon's been in a terrible accident. And I kept trying to call his cell phone and he didn't answer. And about 20 minutes later, Mesa PD showed up at my house and I knew it wasn't good. And we got to the hospital and the police presence in the parking lot even made it worse for me. And I went into the hospital, and about 45 minutes later, my son succumbed to his injuries in surgery. He was a very integral part of our community and worked with a lot of Hispanic illegal people. But my son always was a generous man and bought a lot of those children gifts and made sure they had Christmases, and met them at the ball field to play soccer and buy them pizza on Saturdays to keep them out of gangs and to make sure they understood the importance of an education. So when my son was killed and when all these people started making me realize what a humble, generous man my son was, I didn't know these things about my son. I knew I had to fight for his memory. But then when I found out that the illegal who had killed my son had been a previously convicted criminal who didn't show up for his court date, which is 80% of the time, and who, when he was finally brought back to Colorado to face his charges, the judge basically slapped him on his hand, didn't deport him, and said, have a nice life in the United States. And he ultimately went on to kill my son. I knew from that moment on, number one, I had to fight and make people aware that you have to be careful of who these federal judges are, who you're voting into office. Don't just go down a ballot and mark yes, yes, yes. Find out where they stand on things and get them out of office. Get them off the bench, because they are interpreting our laws to fit their narrative, and they're not thinking about you or I or any of us when they're doing these types of things. The second thing is that illegal criminals are given less sentences than you or I would for the same crimes that they commit. In Arizona, up until a few years ago, they only had to serve 50% of their sentence. And an Arizona citizen had to serve 85% of their sentence. Governor Doug Ducey changed that, but a lot of states in this country still only require an illegal alien to serve 50% of their sentence, and then again, they're re-released out into our country. I knew that a secure border was the only answer, and I've been very educated in the time that I've spent with the advisory board to the cartel information that Brandon Darby has enlightened me to, and just knowing how deep-seated this problem is. I'm very blessed that I'm a part of this and can be a part of this pivotal moment in history where the American people have taken the power back into their own hands, and we are going to do what our useless politicians won't. This is not a manufactured crisis. My son will not have died in vain. I will make sure there are changes in this country. This is a crisis created by our politicians in D.C. who have ignored this problem for decades. They created this, and they don't want to clean up their mess, and they're going to have to. And I just want to say one more thing. A wall may not keep everybody out, but no wall will keep no one out.
So this is, so Steve, this is really your neck of the woods, and everyone is just feeling so terrible about what you and Marianne have gone through. How did you find out about Brian, and what are you trying to do with him?
Well, I have a couple of friends that are a member of the board, and they contacted me, and they had talked to Brian about what he was doing. And they contacted me and asked, would you want to be on the advisory board? And I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. Because again, Brian is succeeding where our politicians have failed.
And after you lost Grant, you started your own institute. Why don't you just tell people what that's about?
Look, the Grant Rodebeck Institute is a think tank, basically. We want to be one of the #1 sources of information on illegal alien crime. We want to be able to put the statistics out. Right now, we want to put billboards up, and we want to put billboards of our loved ones in sanctuary cities. We want the faces to go with the names.
And, Congressman, I think you're mic'd up.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here today, sir.
Sure, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, please, go ahead, please.
Working?
I don't think it's mic's on.
It's not working? It is working.
I don't
Here,
think so.
go ahead.
How about this? Okay, that's better. That's working. It's a pleasure to be back down here with you folks, and I have come down to this area many times over the course of my political career. In fact, I was thinking about it today, and the first time I came down to this area was in 2002. A young man, a park ranger by the name of Chris Egley, was killed by some cartel members right by Organ Pipes Cactus National Park. I came down for that funeral. Later, I came down for Robert Krentz's funeral, a rancher who was also killed by illegal aliens on his ranch. Just came from the memorial that we have up on a fence there for Mr. Taylor, a Border Patrol agent, again, killed by illegal aliens. I have spoken to literally hundreds of folks like Steve and Marianne who have lost loved ones. This has been going on now for many, too damn long. I can't stand it anymore. I can't stand the fact that people are dying, thousands. It really is thousands. It's hard to believe. You know, people think you're being hyperbolic when you say, in fact, thousands of Americans have been killed by people who are in this country illegally. They should never have been here in the first place. Those people should not be dead. These families should not be going through this. What other kind of a situation can you imagine our country has ever faced where this kind of thing has gone on for so long and politicians have refused? And if you say, well, how can this be? I mean, certainly people want secure borders. Don't most Americans want? Yeah, people want secure borders. How can they ignore the plight of people like Marianne and Steve and the thousands of others? It is an issue, believe this or not, of follow the money. Okay? Because people get money. I mean, contributions flow to politicians many times from people who are benefiting from the fact that we have so many illegal aliens in this country. I always said there were two problems I always had in Congress trying to do anything about this issue. One was the Democrat Party that saw massive immigration, both legal and illegal, as a source of voters, potential voters and real voters. And the other problem I had was the Republican Party that looked at that same phenomena and saw cheap labor. Hence, you put that together, you know, that block together, it becomes impermeable. And that's why, even though it's amazing, and you can say this over and over again, how can it be that we've ignored it? It is a follow the money issue. It truly is, and it's despicable. It's despicable. And I will tell you this, I believe this with all my heart, and I have told my colleagues this, I have told people at every single level of government that I've ever spoken to on this issue. When you ignore this issue, when you set up sanctuary cities, when you refuse to do what you were elected to do, and that is protect the people of this country, then every single person that is killed in this country or maimed, everybody who is raped, all of those crimes, all of these politicians are culpable. They are as dangerous, they are as guilty as anybody doing the crime. Congressman. And so that is why I am so happy to be here, because finally somebody is doing something. And God bless you guys. I tell you, I am so happy to be a part of this, because I know these people. And I'll tell you, you could not have better folks involved with this. They're good people who want to do this for the right reason. There's not a single person up here who benefits by this financially. I'm saying, follow them. Nobody up here benefits by this. Only the people of this country, if we get this done, and we will because of them. And I really mean it, especially that guy standing up there.
The Congressman, just as someone who's covered Capitol Hill, a lot of people assume that Republicans are conservatives. But it's like it doesn't seem to play out that way on Capitol Hill, and it seems like the Republican leadership is actually there to block conservatives. Is there a specific incident or something you would share? Let's talk about one, and go ahead and name names.
There's so many.
Name some names.
All right, well, I can tell you right now, I'd only been in Congress for about a month or so, and I found out that there was this stuff that you do every Wednesday. The Republicans meet in this one area and have a caucus, and they plot and scheme, and the Democrats meet in the other area and they plot and scheme of what they're going to do. Okay, so I go there and I'm listening, and I find out that at the end you can have a few minutes to address the caucus if there's time left over. Individual members can get up if they've got a thing, and they say, hey, listen, I've got this issue. So every time I'd go up and I'd say, hey, I have this issue. I'd like to talk to you. And this, as I say, I went to Congress in 1998 with this issue, okay? So, and I said, I'd like to talk to you about it, but all I have is I've got a 4-minute videotape I'd like to show. No sound. It's just a night vision camera of organ pipes, actually. And so I said, I'd like to have it. No, I'm sorry, you can't do it. Well, finally, the caucus chair wasn't there one day. And so I went to the assistant caucus chair, and they said, oh, okay, you can do it, because they didn't know anything about it, right? And so they wheel in that old big machine, and you shove the old VCR. That's how long ago this was, right? And shove the VCR.
Was it blinking 12?
That's right. That's right. And it's a 4-minute video, okay? There's no sound. All it is, you can see organ pipes, and there's a bunch of people, that are camped there, and it's the middle of the night, and it looks like, over here on the side, it looks like a fire starting. But it's not a fire, it's just human beings over there waiting to come in at the right time, and their body heat is looked like that. But then all of a sudden, starts out, and they start coming through, and they wander through all of the campers there, and the first guy's carrying an automatic weapon, a guy behind him with a bunch of drugs, then more. Same thing, goes on like for 4 minutes. They're wandering through this camp, armed, carrying drugs through, and here are all these American campers there, enjoying the facility. Well, that's all it was. That's all it was. And it stopped. There were 224 Republicans in that caucus when I started. There were 4 when I ended. They all walked out. And they walked out saying things to me that I can't repeat here. Because they did not want to see it. You see what I mean? I was forcing them to deal with something they did not want to deal with. And believe me, at the time, I can remember being told by the chief of staff for President Bush.
The name?
The second, Karl Rove, tells me, we have this big argument, and he's telling me, you're a traitor to the party, you're a traitor to the president. And I said, I'm telling you right now that anything else happens like 9/11, and it's done because remember, those people were here illegally. Remember that, 9/11. They were on visas, but they had all overstayed or lied about the visas. And so I said, if we have another event like 9/11, and we've done nothing more to secure our borders than we had done up to that point in time, I said the blood of the people killed will be on the president's head and on members of Congress that refuse. And so he's yelling at me on the phone as I'm driving up to Washington from our house in Alexandria, and he's screaming and yelling, "You're a traitor to the party." He said, "Don't ever darken the doorstep of the White House," he told me. "Don't ever darken the doorstep." And I said, "Well, listen. First of all, the welcome mat has never been out for me there. And secondly, it's not your house." And by the way, I was never invited back to the White House.
Let me take this in a different direction. This is for Brian and for Chris Kobach. Walk me through why this is just not a glorified stunt. Why this is just not, some pipe dream about this. What is it about this that makes it real versus a stunt? Because you go online and you see the Democratic left. They're saying this is just a stunt. Walk the audience through why it's not a stunt.
I think I briefly mentioned why it's not a stunt and why I created it. And I created it out of frustration. I'm a citizen. I'm nothing more than a citizen of the United States. I feel deeply invested to this country. I lost my limbs for this nation. It's not a stunt. This is not a stunt. That's not why I'm here playing games. Like I said, I want to get this wall built, for these families. When I met them and heard the stories of how they lost their children, I mean, how can you look them in their eyes and tell them that, no, you can't have border security? I have 2 children, 5 and 3, and I couldn't imagine something bad happened to them. That's why this is not a stunt. We're doing this for the people, to protect people like these families. Protect, if we lose one American, it's too many lives that have been lost. This is about the people.
The other reason somebody might accuse us of, it's a stunt, you're not going to solve the problem, you're not going to be able to build those 1,600 miles, is, no, we won't be able to build 1,600 miles, but with the 20 million that Brian raised through the GoFundMe effort and through the contributions that keep coming in, one of the amazing things is we've been studying this issue constantly. We've been so busy for the past month, you wouldn't believe it. But looking at the cost, the federal government is talking about maybe, be upwards of $4 million, $5 million a mile. It's not that expensive. Those are federal government numbers. The same people who pay $200 for a toilet in the Defense Department. For a hammer, that's right. We find that we can build a very good hammer, that's right. We found that we can do this for a much smaller cost. We're talking maybe a third, 1/4 of the cost. And so let's just pick a number. Let's just say that with $20 million, we're able to build 10 miles of wall. Well, that's 10 miles of wall that needs to get built. And what if we raise $100 million and suddenly we're up to 50 miles of wall? That's 50 miles of wall. That's more than this administration has been able to build with the shackles that Congress has put on them. So we're talking about a significant force multiplier. And think of it this way. For every mile that we build, and I was mentioning this when we were talking about the Montezuma Pass earlier, for every mile you build, you free up Border Patrol agents. Now, I don't know if it's 1-to-1, that 1 mile is worth the force multiplier of another Border Patrol agent. Maybe it's 2-to-1. But if we build 50 miles of wall, that's like adding 50 or 100 Border Patrol agents. It's a multiplier that increases their effectiveness in all of the places that don't have the wall. So, yeah, the federal government is moving slowly and not nearly as fast as we want it to move. That's why we're going to get in there and help them. And whether it's 5 miles, 10 miles, 50 miles, or 500 miles, whatever it is the number we can build, it's going to help the American people. It's going to help those Border Patrol officers. It's not a stunt. It's a start, and it's a big start.
Jennifer?
Did you already?
Folks?
Here, go ahead, sir. She has the microphone.
Folks,
we're streaming online, so we want the nation to be able to not just see you, but also hear your questions. So Jennifer is going to walk around. We want everybody to get their questions in.
Oh, that's great.
No pressure.
No, none at all, actually. The president has an opportunity to declare a crisis. What in the world is stopping him politically or other reasons from being able to do that and get this thing started and helping you folks?
Let's start with Tom Tancredo on that one.
I wanted Steve to name names.
We'll do that in a short.
Well, first of all, there are political issues, of course, because a lot of politicians say, a lot of congressmen say, well, look, if you do that, it establishes a precedent that we don't like. Because then the next president can say, well, what about global warming? I think that's a national security issue. I'm going to declare that kind of a situation. There are political issues to think about in it. There's also a legal issue. Now, you know as well as I do what will happen that the minute that, in fact, they're doing judge shopping right now, I guarantee you, in anticipation of the president declaring a national emergency. Because the minute he does, they will take it to some liberal judge somewhere who will, in fact, stop it. And then we'll have to go through this process of appeals and that sort of thing. And Chris is far better than I to explain the legal side of this, but I just know that there are obstacles. I don't know if those are the ones that the president is the most concerned about. I know they're there, and I know they're big ones. But Chris is a better, probably, he's a lawyer, and he can tell you about that.
I think the Ninth Circuit is probably where they're going to go.
That's, of course, where they're going to go. The Ninth Circuit, which unfortunately Arizonans in the audience are part of the Ninth Circuit, and that's why so many of the cases here end up going the wrong way unless they go to the Supreme Court and they can be corrected. But yeah, this does qualify as a national emergency. But in addition to that, there are multiple federal statutes that authorize the President of the United States to build without congressional authorization, to build for the defense of the United States. There's a Defense Contracting Act that allows him to do it. There's another act that specifically allows the President to build structures and spend money to stop drug trafficking into the United States. Seems like this would qualify for that, wouldn't it? And so you've got multiple federal statutes, and there are other ones I haven't mentioned that authorize him to just act under existing federal law without even declaring a national emergency. So I guess to the larger point, does he have the legal authority to act independently without Congress? He absolutely does. There are multiple statutes in addition to national emergency, and Ann Coulter wrote a great article this week. He also has Article 2 powers. His commander-in-chief power is essentially defending the United States. And a country that does not have a secure border has a need to be defended. And so there are multiple bases legally for him to do this. And when he says that, and he said that during the State of the Union as well, he's absolutely right.
The acting attorney general today gave testimony that said that what you just said about drugs was overblown. Do you want to make sure people understand exactly what he was trying to say?
Yeah. So what he was trying to say. So the acting attorney general said something, I don't remember the exact quote, but along the lines of what we
Matt Whitaker.
Yeah, Whitaker. He said that most of the drugs we discover are interdicted at the ports of entry. That is true. Most of the ones that we discover are at the port of entry. But that's because you get it already. That's because there are roughly in any given year 86 million or so, between 85 and 90 million cars and vehicles that come through the port of entry. We get to stop each one of them. We can have the drug sniffing dogs go through them. We can search them if we want. They're Border Patrol agents. And we do discover thousands and thousands of pounds of drugs being brought in through the ports of entry. But you don't have that situation between the ports of entry in these vast stretches of deserts where we only discover probably less than a third of the trafficking that comes in. And so therefore that number is, I would guess, probably larger than the total amount, if we knew what that number is, larger than the ones that we can easily discover at the port of entry. And to prove my point, many of you will remember that in 1998, the federal government deployed sensors and the rheostats, the tethered rheostats, along much of the southern border. In that year, the number of drugs that we interdicted coming in illegally between the ports of entry went up 45%. Well, it wasn't because the number of drugs trafficked went up 45%. It was because we suddenly were able to start discovering a higher percentage of it. So the bottom line is, yes, of the drugs that we discover, most of them we discover at the port of entry. But there is a huge sum, thousands of pounds every year, that are coming through between the ports of entry, and that's where the wall comes into play.
If the president declares either an executive action or a national security emergency, and he calls out the Army to come to the border, and he brings out the Army Corps of Engineers, he starts turning dirt, and the Ninth Circuit tries to stop him, what are his previous presidents like Andrew Jackson and others what are his options then? Does he have to stop building, or what does he have to do?
Well, it depends on which court it is, what they say. One of these issues that's been rolling around in the courts a lot these days is you get a district judge a federal district judge in, say, San Francisco, and that judge issues a decision, and he says, "I declare that my decision binds the entire United States of America." Well, that's never been tested in the Supreme Court. Can a district judge in one little part of the country, and that's why, surprise, surprise, they go to San Francisco to find their best judges, or Hawaii, and then can that judge bind the whole country? I think in a situation like this, where you have a national emergency, a super huge profile issue, that question may be finally adjudicated. Can a district judge really do that, sitting in San Francisco, say that the entire southern border is under his command and no dirt shall be turned? I think that's one thing. And I think there are just, depending on the statute, the plaintiffs are going to have to make an argument. And in some instances, they will have a really tough time where the federal statute so clearly authorizes the president to build.
If you were advising the president today, looking at the options as he goes to El Paso next week, between trying to press on with whatever the appropriations process is going to do, or taking executive action, or declare a national security emergency. In that range of alternatives, what would you recommend?
Well, as we've been discussing here, this is a true crisis. It is a crisis. American lives are being lost. American jobs are being lost. Drugs, deaths, terrorism coming through. So I believe that it is so urgent that the president should move forward on all. Continue to ask Congress, but he should also move forward with the national emergency. He should also move forward with other areas where he has clear statutory authority. At this point, I don't think we have the time to say, well, let's try this option for 6 months, and then let's move on to the other option for 6 months. We have a real problem here where people on the stage can tell you that human life, there's a consequence. The longer we wait, the more people come through who might one day kill an American citizen. And I just don't think at this point we can just sit on our hands and just hope that one of these, try them one at a time. We've got to move forward. I think the president gets it. He wants to move forward.
Hello. Hi, does anybody have a question who hasn't asked one yet? You,
Probably
sir.
time for two more? Or?
Please say your names.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is Peter. I live here in Quail Creek.
Hey, Peter.
Brian, I have a question for you guys. Are there any legal impediments to you guys starting this project? Let's say you got $100 million and you want to start building part of the wall. What legal impediments could stand in your way?
It's not. There's not a lot, and the ones that I think are standing in our way would be things like some butterfly or a lizard that is protected. And we're doing things proactively to mitigate that, to make sure it's not a major issue beforehand. We have different things we're doing privately, with politicians, and just we're kind of keeping it all secretly, and just we're not going to be announcing certain things to the public, basically, because if we start announcing these things, it's going to bring attention to it, and these people who are against the wall are going to try to, do lawsuits against us.
So I have fought against the ACLU in many different immigration-related cases over my career, and they always choose the jurisdiction shop. They try to pick the judge that's going to be the most activist and is going to read the law the most broadly and find all kinds of things that aren't written in the law. And so when Brian says we're keeping things under wraps right now, well, we're choosing where we're going to build, and we're looking at all of the legal factors that come into play, and we're going to build where our case is unassailable, where there's no question that if the ACLU comes at us, we're going to come right back at them and we're going to win in court. And so that's why we're moving carefully.
But there's no doubt, as the gentleman I think is implying, that legally they're going to come after, just like they're doing the president. They're going to try to use lawfare here to try to stop this, correct?
I think it's highly likely. I've been involved in some of these cases where I sit there and I think there's no way the ACLU could do this. There's no good legal argument. Well, they'll come to court anyway just to tie it up for a little while, just to get a preliminary injunction until a judge finally says, yeah, there's no way, there's no good argument you have here. But they've tied it up for months in the meantime. So having dealt with these people before, we're gonna choose our battleground, and we're going to choose it carefully, and we're going to win.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Bob Lawrence. How you guys doing? My question is a little bit more broad. I work on terrorism in biological, and for the ability to an individual to bring across the border a pandemic virus. What are some of the agencies in the United States that are looking at this possibility of killing millions, not one or two at a time?
Well, I'm gonna address that, and so obviously, traveling the southern border, all 9 sectors for nearly the last decade, with our sources, you become privy to a lot of how things are done, and with our government, right, and what they rely upon. So, our government has largely relied upon a belief that Mexican cartels wouldn't allow something through that would prevent those cartels from being able to continue to make money in the future, right? The problem with that is that now we see a situation on our southern border where several of those Mexican cartels have begun to engage in behaviors that hurt them in the long run, and they don't care, right? So we're kind of caught with our pants down as a country when it comes to terrorism threats and when it comes to any biological or any weapon of mass destruction. I think that we're caught with our pants down. If someone offered enough money to Los Zetas or the Gulf Cartel to cross something very dangerous, and the Gulf Cartel knew that it would mean that they would quit making money a year from now or 6 months from now, they would do it anyways. So we are in we have a big problem, and a problem that requires a more aggressive approach from our law enforcement and intelligence agencies than than the U.S. State Department is allowing them to engage in right now. We have a problem that requires an aggressive and well-funded human source program in Mexico, which offends the Mexican government. And we have a problem where we're treating a narco state, a failed narco state, as though they are an equal at a table, as though they're Germany or Canada, when clearly they are, in fact.
How do you defend calling Mexico a failed narco state? Be specific. Well, you've got to back that up, because guys are going to blow you up online right now.
I call them all the time. So here's what we have in Mexico. We have roughly 32 states now. It used to be 31 states in the federal district. They just changed that. Now it's 32 states. And over half of those states in Mexico are under the control or direct influence of paramilitary transnational criminal organizations that we call cartels. When the Mexican government needs to go into more than half of its states to police that state or to go after a criminal, do they send in their federales and their police? No. They send in their military. They send in their Marines. And they send them in convoys similar to what we use in Afghanistan. They send them in armored convoys. They are attacked with RPGs, Russian RPGs, with grenades, with all sorts of weaponry. So when I say they're a failed narco state, I think at the point that over half of your territory is not under your government's operational control, but it's under the operational control of drug cartels, I think that justifies calling them a failed narco state.
Just one follow-on to this. Has the new Mexican government, how are they treating, because they tried to go to war with the cartels and failed, how are they treating the cartels today? What's the difference in actually, and how is it going to affect people in southern Arizona?
There's about as little difference in how the current Mexican government is treating cartels from the former as there is in how our current government is treating cartels from how Obama did. Very little difference. One of the things in the El Chapo trial that came out that I already knew, and anyone who pays attention to it knew, which is that a lot of drugs are interdicted at ports of entry, right? Like, okay. In the El Chapo trial, that came up, that the former Mexican president was accused of receiving $100 million from El Chapo, from the Sinaloa. I think that is true. We've been reporting on that Peña Nieto's connections to drug cartels for many years. But one of the things that also came up is that AMLO took money from El Chapo. And strangely, there was the accusation in court testimony. And strangely, no media outlets other than Breitbart reported that. They reported everything that made border security look bad, but they didn't report that. So what AMLO is currently doing, the current Mexican president, is he's trying to change the use of military power forces, and he's going to call it the National Guard, so even though it's still the same people and the same machines and the same bosses and the same soldiers, so we can't say it's a failed narco state having to use their military. And he's making a deal with the cartels that as long as they go back to doing cocaine and not opiates and not methamphetamine, he'll largely leave them alone, which is another indicator that that is a failed narco state. So we can expect less cooperation from Mexico now than we had during the Obama years, and that's a problem.
Jennifer?
Yeah, we have one question here. Ma'am, what is your name?
My name is Marie. I live in Quail Creek. Thank all of you. You've been very enlightening. I have a question in regards to the area along the border that is not federally owned or privately owned, but is owned by either reservations or American Indians. I want to know about how the negotiations are going in regards to building a wall along those areas. if anybody can help in that.
I'm going to address that again. I'll address it briefly. Maybe one of my colleagues wants to as well. We have some problems with Native American reservations along our border. When I travel the southwest border, whether it's the Ajo Station, south of Ajo near Lukeville, or whether I'm traveling along the border all the way to the Buenos Aires Reserve, right, on either side of the Tohono O'odham, for instance, what I see are certain signs. I see black water bottles, magic carpet shoes, I call them, the shoes the smugglers wear. I can see that on the other side of the Normandy barrier in Mexico. And then when I go to I-8, north of the Tohono O'odham Reservation, do you know what I see all along the highway in the Vico Valley? And what I see is I see those same items. And what we have is a situation where many of our law enforcement agencies no longer work very closely or share intelligence with law enforcement on the reservation. And that's because many people on that reservation are working with Los Mimos, with that faction of the Sinaloa cartel. We have that across the southern border. No, I'm not saying every Native American is involved in that. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm telling you is that even in our own federal agencies, we're having a problem with cartels paying federal agents. We're having a problem with cartels paying U.S. soldiers. We're having a problem in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas with law enforcement officers taking money from cartels. Their narcotics unit stealing the drugs and then selling them back to the cartel. We have a problem with public corruption. The cancer that is happening in Mexico has metastasized, and it is spreading across our country. And those of us paying attention are watching it as it spreads from tissue to bone to it's just spreading. So when we talk about the reservations on the border, we have a significant problem. It's going to be very difficult to build anything there. And many of their law enforcement officers are, in fact, working with the regional transnational criminal groups.
Congressman? Only half facetiously, I would tell you that there's a lot of people that would suggest that when we complete our wall, it's along the entire southern border, that we should continue and go right up on this side of California and all the way up to Canada. And I'd be totally in favor of that. But I'd also suggest that maybe what we have to do is consider the possibility that if you're going to really deal with it, because you're absolutely right, I've been on Tohono O'odham Reservation, it's incredible. 5-year-old kids walking around loaded, you know, I mean, it's horrible what's happening. Every kid on that reservation, every young kid has a new truck because they've helped actually transport the drugs. It's horrendous what it has done. So maybe we have to build the fence on this side of the reservation instead of the southern side.
Well,
I don't know, just a thought.
There are clearly going to be some cases where it's just like what we currently do. We try to beef up security north of Tohono O'odham. We're going to have to be creative. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not the cartel. It's not the border. It's many sections of border that are very different from each other. It's many cartels that are very different. And what we do to address that is going to have to be creative, and it's going to have to be as dynamic as the problem itself. And I think that this group of people up here, with our commitments and our lives and the prices that some of us have paid, or some of my colleagues have paid for sure, I think that we're going to be able to address that on a case-by-case basis, a 40-mile by 40-mile stretch basis. I think we're going to be able to do that.
How deep into the United States do you think this situation we have with the cartels, and particularly with public corruption, the corruption of law enforcement officials, the judiciary, where they've just got so much money, and also the fear of retaliation against their families, how deep into the United States? We know the drug problem, the opioid problem is a bigger problem in Ohio and in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and places like that. How deep do you think the reach of the cartels goes into the United States?
Well, wow. Well, so one of the things that my team at Breitbart Texas, one of the things we do in our Cartel Chronicles is we use advanced technologies that would creep you out if you knew they existed, and we use them to map out Mexican cartels. And then we write about them, and sometimes we share that information with law enforcement. And I recently helped bust, from Michoacan, it's called Los Viagras, I helped bust their network in Washington State, Chicago, Illinois, and Texas. So they're spread out across our country. And if you look at it, they have our country carved out as their territories. You know, if you look at like who is busted in if we go to the Dakotas, if we go to the back in the shale region, oil region, what you always see is in the indictments you see 2 Mexican nationals and a bunch of U.S. citizens. And you're like, why is that? And it's because they send their people to run their effort and they hire U.S. citizens to do it. And that's across our entire country. They have our country carved up as their territories, and they have it carved up from the southern border of the United States all the way to the northern border. They have their territories. They see our soil as their territory, and it's carved up that way.
So there might be a cartel that has New York, and another cartel has Missouri?
Sort of like that, similar to that, yeah. It's a little, it's similar. It's similar enough to that to say that.
As simple as you can answer.
Yes, that's
okay.
Great.
Does anybody have any questions who hasn't asked questions yet? Okay, in the back. I'm coming.
Hurry.
I'm going.
I apologize if this has already been answered, but how much of Arizona is walled already and how much more is needed?
Well, okay, so
Marianne, go ahead.
Well, I got my information from Tim Foley from Arizona Border Recon, and it's 5% of the Arizona border has Ballard fencing. 330 miles is barbed wire fencing and Normandy fencing, and 40 miles is nothing.
I think you're probably right. In fact, I'm going to trust your local report on that. I travel that border routinely. I'm very impressed with what they've done in Yuma for a section of Yuma. Very impressed with the 3-tiered fencing system. It's awesome. Not so much with what they've done in the Tucson sector in Ajo right next door, right? So Arizona is wide open, and you have transnational criminal groups who are beginning to behave in a way that indicates they don't care about tomorrow, just like we're dealing with in Texas, which goes back to what the gentleman over here said. It's
Can I
wide
interject
open.
something? I just want to say that the position that Steve and I have been put in dealing with this, and the investigations that I've done since Brandon's death, it's horrifying to me how many illegal alien criminals are caught in our country committing crimes, and they've been deported 6 times, 17 times, 22 times, and they're back again. This is a clear indication to me that if we don't secure our borders, these criminals know when they're deported, we'll be back next week. They know it. They know they get a slap on the hand. They know they're never punished for their crimes in our country. And it could be any one of you tomorrow. It's happened to somebody today, and it is going to happen to somebody tomorrow, and it's going to continue to keep happening to American citizens until this wall starts getting constructed.
Steve. Go ahead, and of course, you know, your institute has got to have come up with something. You've been studying this a while now.
Well, actually, what the Institute came up with is pretty much what Brian's planning on doing. And that's another reason this is so important. I think that what people have to understand is the death of our children was preventable. It shouldn't have happened. In Grant's case, the man should have been serving time for his prior crimes, but again, because he was an illegal, he didn't have to. It was one way to prevent my son's death. Had he been deported after our legal system was done with him, my son would still be alive. Had he not qualified for the Dreamer Act, my son would still be alive. These are preventable crimes. All these child rapes in North Carolina and other states, these are done by criminals that cross our border back and forth regularly, sex trafficking or whatever. These are preventable crimes, and the one way to prevent those people from trafficking is to build the wall or build the fence. There's got to be a way to stop it, slow it down. It's a lot easier to dig a tunnel and take drugs through. Brandon would agree to that. But it's harder to take a human being through that tunnel. It's harder to get a group of people through that tunnel. They're mainly used for drugs. I mean, yes, some of them are for human smuggling. But the criminals that are coming across our country and into our country are the ones using those routes. If we don't figure out a way to stop them or slow them down, all these crimes that you're seeing are going to multiply, and they're going to keep multiplying until they're overwhelming. it's just not going to stop until we stop it, and what Brian's doing. And the Institute, basically, the plan that we've got on the Institute website is pretty much what Brian's planning on doing.
Neil, we have a question.
Let me ask one follow-up. You talked about Yuma, and Yuma being particularly effective, what they've done in Yuma. Can you, Chris and Brian, can you talk a second about the Israeli company that's going to be an advisor to us and what they did in Israel, and they particularly focused on the Yuma example?
Yeah. So, when we think about border security, what country has done it the greatest so far? And I think Israel. Israel, then when they built their wall, they stopped 99.9% of illegal crossings into their country. When was the last time that you've heard of a suicide bomb going off in Israel? Can anyone remember? It's been a while. And it's been a while because they built the fence. They don't have this what we're doing here. They have like a 15-foot fence. It's layered with different layers of security. It's got technology into it. And it would just seem like common sense. Why aren't we contacting these people, the company that built this fence and built this wall? So we contacted them. We reached out to them. They flew down to McAllen, Texas. They sent someone down from their company, from Israel, and came and met with our team, explained what they do, and explained the process of why their technology works, and just backed up all the claims about what their fence is about and what their wall is about. And we thought it would be, why would we not have these people involved in our project in the United States? Why hasn't the United States reached out to these people? Well, the United States government can't bring a foreign affair into their process. And so being a private company building the wall, we can have the best company in the world for wall security or border security working on our team. So we brought them in. They are now on our team as advisors and will be advising us.
And to give you some idea of just how quickly, I think it was in 2013, if I'm remembering it correctly, Israel decided that they needed a wall or a barrier on their essentially their southern, or I guess it'd be southwestern border with Egypt. And it's 220 kilometers, so what is that, about 160 miles or so, that they built this wall. And they got it up in 2 years. When Israel makes a decision, they make a decision and they move. And this company, the Israeli Defense Forces were actually doing much of the labor. And so it was a cooperative between the IDF and this company and a few other entities. And they figured out what makes sense. They tested it. And it's a multi-tiered barrier. It's got the principal barrier, and then there's a dragged sand area with sensors, and then there's a smaller barrier. But it all makes sense. It's all well thought out. They've got cameras and other sensors and sort of alarm devices all throughout it. And these are things that certainly Americans have thought about. The Border Patrol has thought about this. But they've developed a system that really works well. Would we be using exactly the same model that Israel has on its Egyptian border? Probably not. Would we be using a model that has a lot of their elements in it? Probably so.
Jennifer?
Yes, we have a question back here.
Yes, I lost a couple of friends this past year to the opioid crisis, and it seems to me when American citizens died in the war, and because of the underbelly of the Humvees and so on, were not protected with the improvised explosive devices, we figured out a way to shield those. Now, if this crisis is coming across the southern border, why can't we seal the underbelly of our country? I mean, we're protecting American lives, just like we do in a foreign war, but this is on our home turf where we should be safe.
I want to address what you just said. I think that's exactly, yes. I'm going to tell you something. We've gotten to a point, like when we talk about the opioid crisis, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry. I have that in my family as well. Thankfully, I haven't lost anyone yet. But I have addiction in my family as well, my extended family. So I'm terribly sorry for your loss, for your friends. But we have to understand that we're dealing with transnational criminal organizations that are way beyond the point of where Al Capone was with alcohol prohibition. Their tentacles in the government, their weaponry, their influence over the nation, their influence over their media outlets has far surpassed what Al Capone could have ever dreamed of. Simply legalizing, it's not going to stop these groups. Like I said earlier, they switched to illegal immigration, some of them, because they weren't making money from drugs. Others switched to opium, which is why we have a heroin problem. And their heroin sucks, so now they started adding fentanyl, which is why we're seeing fentanyl deaths. We're not going to, a vital step in dealing with them is this wall. But we're not going to have peace and security in our communities and in that border region or across our country until we go after those Mexican cartels and we take them out.
Well, and I made a startling discovery in some of my research that I do late into the night, but 53,220 Americans died in Vietnam. And since 9/11, 63,000 Americans have died at the hands of illegal aliens in our country. That doesn't even include the drug overdoses and the deaths caused by drugs. So add that to it, and this is a crisis on our homeland, and this needs to be stopped.
So we spent a lot of time on a lot of these issues, but maybe if we could just sort of wrap up with maybe what you want people to take away as they go forth into evangelizing. Congressman, maybe one or two takeaways, and then we'll just sort of go through the line.
You can hope, and let me tell you, it's just that. But you can hope that what we will do here with the wall, as it becomes a reality, I'm hoping that it will embarrass the politicians in this nation, especially the Congress. Now, I say you can hope. That's a very difficult task, let me tell you, to embarrass them about these things. But it is nonetheless an important step to take. So every time you talk to anybody, any elected representative, anybody that has any influence in this area, you explain to them that because they haven't done what they needed to do, there are people who are going to try and take up that banner. And doesn't that embarrass them? Doesn't that make them feel like what they have, what they're sworn to do has not been accomplished? All I can think of is that I would hate to have somebody, a parent, coming to me and telling me, this is what has happened. I could not possibly say to them, knowing what I know, knowing what we've told you today, there's no way that anybody can say to you, there's nothing that we can do about it. You know now that that's not true. So take that away from this meeting and do with it what you will.
Steve, please.
What I'd like everybody to realize is that what Brian is doing, and trust me, I am so very honored to be part of this, but what Brian is doing, again, is succeeding where our politicians are failing. And if you go home and you think about it tonight, and I know that most of you probably saw the pictures of Marianne and I's children up here when you came in. Now that you've met us and seen us, and you think about our children, and then you think about what Brian's doing, and Chris and Brandon and Steve Bannon, and you think about what they're doing for us, number one, they're doing for all of you. This isn't about just us. This is about protecting all of your families, your children, your grandchildren. Because Marianne said it before, it's not a matter of if it happens to you, it's a matter of when.
May 12th, this year, May 12th will be 5 years that Brandon was killed. And this journey has been gut-wrenching, it's been horrendous, it's been enlightening, and I think to say that today, that this is where my journey has landed me, to be among these people and know that my fight is going to come to fruition, that something is finally going to happen on our southern border to protect all of you and to protect all of my fellow American citizens, I couldn't ask to be at a better place right now. And join our cause and become a part of this, and go to wefundthewall.us and become a part of us. Let your voices be heard.
We're going to, let's jump over, Brian.
We got lunch.
But hold on. Maybe, Brandon, you've said a lot tonight. Is there anything positive going on? you maybe give some hopeful things.
Yeah, I'm looking at this room right now, and I'm saying, hey, this is positive. Thank you.
Chris?
I would say, I'd put it this way. If you ask my wife what one of my biggest personality flaws is, she'd probably say that I'm really, really impatient. And no matter, as long as we've been married, I just haven't gotten any better. And I acknowledge that is one of my flaws. But in this particular context, I've noticed that everybody else on this team is just as impatient as I am, and that is a good thing, because you're not going to see this organization just sitting around. I get impatient at things like this, although this is really awesome, but I think we need to do this, but we need to get building. And so you're not going to see this organization just sitting around talking and doing nothing. We're going to be moving as fast as humanly possible. We've already achieved so much more than I imagined was possible when I got involved. So rest assured, Brian is surrounded by a bunch of impatient people who want to get the job done. And I feel good being on this team, and you should feel good supporting this team. We're going to get the job done.
Stephen K.
Yeah. But before we turn back to Brian and to end it, is just two things. One is about prayer, and the other is about action. This weekend, you got to pray for President Trump, right? If people in Washington and certain elements in the White House will not have his back, it's going to take your prayer to make sure he makes the right decision. And he is now facing the toughest decisions of his presidency in the next 30, 60, 90 days. At the same time, and you saw how they treated the acting Attorney General of the United States today in that hearing. They're coming after President Trump with no holds barred, okay? He's going to have to make these decisions. He's going to need your prayers. The other's action. All you need to do is go to this website. You do not have to donate. You don't have to give any contribution. Just go take an action. Go to the website and push it out to your friends. All we need you to do is to join this. If you join it and we get it out to your friends, it'll be a multiplier, and we'll actually not just get a wall built, we'll save this country.
Well, Brian, I think it's your turn. And first, I just want to thank everyone for coming here tonight. And I thought it was a very positive discussion. There were some great questions, and I think we learned a lot. And I think we're going to meet some people tonight that are going to be friends for a long time. But go ahead, please, Brian.
Yeah, no problem. Well, first of all, this whole thing started as a simple idea of me just being in my house, upset, pissed off, and just being one person. This was one person, and I took just one step. Just as you all took one step to come here today and be a part of this, that's the first step. You all came here today to show up because you believe in this and it's important to you. That first step that I took to put this out here to start this whole thing, kind of got this all rolling. And it's people like yourselves and everyone across the United States who are just like you. It's just not a couple hundred in here. There's hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, and all of you are united by this movement. And we are all this movement, and it's just going to continue to grow. And it's only going to grow with you guys. So we need you to keep getting the message out there, contacting your friends, your family, politicians, because this is a very important thing. And these guys right here, how can you look at them and not be touched by their story? How can you not take action to get the wall built by knowing their stories and all the other people's stories that you hear in the community? That's what this is about. It's about protecting our people, protecting our country, and giving our children and our grandchildren the freedoms we have today. Because just like that, just like my legs were taken away that fast, our freedoms can be taken away that fast. And I realize that, and I've learned these lessons and these different things of being in these situations, of becoming a triple amputee. And the one thing I've learned is that no matter what you're up against, you can always overcome it. And the way you overcome it is just giving it everything you have, trying your hardest, remaining positive, and having a support group, of having a team. You guys are my team. I went to battle for this country, and now I'm calling on all of you to be my warriors, to be my army, to be these guys, they're warriors, and fight for them, fight for these families, and let's get this wall built.
Want to thank Jim Hoff and all the guys at Gateway Pundit. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Kolfage, and I created the viral campaign that raised over $20 million for the southern border wall, and it's only possible because of your donation. So thank you. But do you really think the Democrats in Congress will take the money you donated and put it towards the southern border wall? I doubt it. That's why we are changing our mission from we fund the wall to we build the wall, and we the people can build the wall. We consulted with our nation's leading experts on border security and construction. There's hundreds of miles of private land along the border. To continue this mission, we need you to opt in so that your donation counts. The one thing I learned from being a triple amputee is that anything is possible. We, the people, can build the wall, but I need your help. If you're sick and tired of Democrats holding national security over our heads, opt in now. We build the wall, and we can start now.